All right, hello and welcome everyone to another Warframe Builds Refresh. Today we are talking about LAVOS because unlike Citrine, he got a new augment that is probably the single most worthwhile thing to be doing for him. So we of course have a new build for LAVOS. For that, we are of course first going to talk about the shards that I have on this build and whether or not they are required. In this case, unfortunately, the answer is yes. 2 regular green shards are pretty much required for this build to work. The +4 total of corrosion stats is going to make it so that we can strip armor with corrosive status, and it's kind of needed for the build. If you don't do this, you're going to have to find another way to get around armor, but this is by far the best way to do it, as LAVOS has a lot of good ways to proc a ton of corrosive, kind of no matter what weapons you are using, so they're pretty much required for this. Otherwise, in these other 3 slots, a lot more duration is probably what I would do. I think probably the best for me is 2 Tau duration, and then 1 Tau parkour speed, so that he's a bit faster. But of course, that Tau parkour speed is purely to taste, and you could do more duration, change it out for strength, really whatever's more comfortable for you, and it's probably going to be pretty good. For that, the build is this. So, this is a Valence Formation build, because this is the best thing that LAVOS could be doing at this point, and I don't think it's particularly close. So this is Passive Augment. Upon ability cast, applies the ability element as 200% elemental damage to your weapons with a guaranteed status for 20 seconds. So to explain a little bit about how this actually works, there are a couple caveats for it sometimes not doing exactly what you might want. So this applies the element that you mix into your ability. So if you like choose heat, choose corrosive, choose electricity, choose cold for some reason, you will basically apply that as an elemental mod to your weapon. Separate from that, your weapon will force proc, all of your weapons will force proc that element, even if they do not actually have that element on them anymore. What I mean by that is if you are using a melee influence weapon, for example, that has, like, let's say, corrosive viral electricity on it, for example, I can't think of any weapons that would be doing that, and you attempt to add heat procs to it, when you add the heat from Valence Formation, that heat will combine with the electricity and turn into radiation. So you will not be able to proc electricity anymore and turn on melee influence and then have your guaranteed heat procs spreading to all of the enemies. So that's how it works. It applies as a regular mod, but you will still get heat procs even if the heat is removed from the situation on your actual weapon, because it is forcing the heat procs to happen. It doesn't have to actually be on the weapon for those to go through. Yeah, that's how this works whenever you apply it to things. If you're applying combined elementals, they're always like separate, or they combine, of course, with like if you add more viral to your already viral weapon, you will simply have more and higher viral. But that is how Valence Formation works. It's a little inconvenient, pretty much very specifically in just the melee influence category, but it also is technically kind of worse for condition overload effects as well, which does affect things like the Sea-Doo. Besides that, this build, while I think it is probably better to just go all in on Valence Formation and use like Roar or like what other damage increases, or stick with Eclipse, which was what we have here, which I'll explain in a moment, and just kind of not use his abilities and like go all in on like narrow-minded in like much higher duration so that you don't have to refresh things as often and just turn LAVOS into a total weapons platform, that honestly, with good guns, will perform much better than what we're going to do here today. But if you actually want to use LAVOS's underwhelming kit, this build is going to be for that. For that, and in order to do that, we need Precision Intensify, because his 4 is by far his best ability, and it is not close. And in terms of other strength adds, we have Transient Fortitude, Power Drift, and of course, Molt Augmented. And on top of that, we are also getting the sub-effect of Archon Vitality, as our 4 is almost always going to be infused with heat whenever we cast it, so the double procs on that are going to be a considerable increase in damage, and we want to run a Vitality anyway. With that, that brings our total amount of strength in this build, because also Growing Power is here, from the 170 up to 260, plus the 60 from Molt Augmented up to 320, and then to 345 with Growing Power. So our 4 is about as strong as it realistically is going to get while keeping it within good range. Speaking of good range, we are on Augur Reach and Stretch. That gives our 4 a nice, comfy 43-meter radius, which is solid. Like, you're going to hit pretty much everything that you are experiencing with this 4 every time you cast it, and it is a non-line of sight AoE. The problem with this AoE is on low levels, it'll kill everything. At higher levels, you need to use its sub-effect, which is having more elements on it will double the damage for each element affecting the enemy. So you do need to prime enemies at higher levels, which is a pain, but it is doable with certain weapons. Unfortunately, most of those weapons also just kill everyone that you are shooting them at, so we'll have to use the Sea-Doo in this video. And then also for survivability, we are running Archon Vitality, Adaptation, and Arcane Blessing, putting us at about 2,600 health, with, of course, you know, Adaptation 90% DR. And also for survivability, we are running Eclipse. So, LAVOS has, of course, better than 100% uptime on Eclipse because he does not use any energy. So this is a just free 75% damage reduction at all times that stacks with Adaptation and is going to be very good survivability alongside all of the health tanking that we are doing. Speaking of health tanking, LAVOS does have a heal in his kit. For those of you that forgot, Ophidian Bite actually is a heal, so you can use this to heal back up whenever you take damage, so you don't need to use any outside healing. And that's pretty much what's going on. You're basically trying to spam Catalyze as much as possible. So you're going to cast Catalyze, followed by immediately casting Transmutation Probe to try and get rid of the cooldown on Catalyze. And then cast Ophidian Bite, usually whenever you just want to swap the element that you're using on your guns. And then cast Eclipse on cooldown so that you can just always have a big amount of damage reduction. I have basically never needed to use the damage output version of Eclipse, and there's not really much reason to, though it is, you know, 51% damage increase isn't nothing. So if you don't feel like you need the damage reduction, you're honestly probably not in high enough level content to need the damage added, but maybe. So yeah, that's what's going on with the LAVOS build. In terms of weapons, so I wanted to show this set of weapons because none of them are Incarnans, and one of them is kind of required to show off his 4, which is the Sea-Doo. Sea-Doo is doing usual things here. This is like pretty normal stuff for the Sea-Doo, pretty regular. Like it's on, you know, viral heat. It's got blast on its alternate fire and so on and so forth. Galvanized Hell. Galvanized Savvy, usual things for the Sea-Doo, Hunter Munition, so on and so forth. Doing very regular things here. You know, just usual LAVOS stuff is what is occurring in terms of the Sea-Doo. It's generally pretty good. It's a shotgun, which is going to be very nice whenever we swap our Valence onto Corrosive, because each pellet will proc Corrosive individually, and whenever we have Galvanized Hell procced, that actually means that any shot that fully hits an enemy will completely remove all of their armor if they are vulnerable to the full Corrosive stacks. And then I'm also on the Kuva Nukor. Now, the reason I'm on the Kuva Nukor is kind of to make a point of why using his abilities is maybe not particularly good. And I did not want to use an Incarnate for this. So the Kuva Nukor is kind of like the early available old meta weapon, and I wanted to show how good this is, just on like a pretty basic build. It's a Cascadia Flare build, doing pretty normal stuff. It's still on like Gal Shot and everything like that. It's also worth noting that this is not even like a maxed out or like... It's actually not even like the one you probably should have for the Kuva Nukor. It's only at 33. Like, it is not a maxed out perfect Nukor by any means. And then also running the Cost Assist, as this is like the example of a weapon that gets kind of screwed over in terms of melee influence being run on it. But it is a very good weapon to add like consistency to corrosive procs too, and just more damage in terms of your statuses goes a pretty long way with this. And you can also force electricity, which does increase your damage a good bit. So that's just a normal stuff before the cost assist as well. In terms of companions, I'm just bringing Taxon with the Volklock. This is just good for shield gating and just like a little bit more survivability. Companions are really kind of a wash for LAVOS. You could bring something like Worm for more status immunity, but you're status immune a good chunk of the time due to your passive giving you immunity whenever you pick up energy orbs for 10 seconds. So I would really like it if that was longer than 10 seconds for consistency's sake. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. In terms of the focus school, this is usually not going to matter. Some people do just take Unairu if you want this as a consistent armor strip, especially for harder targets, but Madurai is generally going to be pretty good and increase your damage a good chunk. So there's a lot of things you can do there because you don't need the energy from Zenrik because you don't use it. But yeah, that's pretty much what's going on with LAVOS. And now I'm going to show you something that pretty much only happens in the Simulacrum. So for this is the full level 225 Steel Path, just like a Rokin battle group, as it were. And we're going to go ahead and turn on our 2, shoot out the Sea-Doo, and then throw our 4 out here to show the damage off of it. This is like an absolutely ideal case, and you can see that it kills most of them. Most of them do die, and then I can swap in to Corrosion on my Sea-Doo, and you can see how fast it just rips the armor off them with a shotgun. And our survivability there under the effects of Eclipse, pretty good. Like, obviously the enemies were dying, so that certainly helps their survivability as well. But enemies do have a pretty hard time at getting through this defensively. To show just how, like, tough he is at higher levels, we will grab some health orbs and buff him up here. And I'll just spawn these guys in and just let them shoot me. Keep in mind, I don't have any healing outside of, I think, Meta-Ray is on Taxon, so I will eventually die. But the enemies have to work for it. You're pretty tough. If you're actively trying to stay alive and actively trying to kill enemies with something that's better than swinging a breadstick at them, you're probably going to be okay with this build. This is evidence to the fact that you probably don't need Eclipse for this build. But if you're trying to use his abilities to kill, you're probably going to need more time to be, you know, killing the enemies. And you can see the heal from Ophidian Bite, making it pretty easy there. Also opening to finishers if you want to. But yeah, that's what's up with the build. You're basically trying to cast your 4 as much as you possibly can, which means casting, hitting your 4 once. I put it on inverted so that I can just tap in the elementals that I want to use, and then I hold to cast. So doing that, putting heat on it, throwing it out, and putting heat everywhere, and hopefully killing most of the enemies. And then doing heat again and throwing out my 3, and then usually swapping to corrosive and just hitting my 1 so that corrosive is the weapon on, or is the element that is on all of my weapons most of the time. Heat, of course, is not a bad thing to have on your weapons, and if you are fighting something like the Murmurs, you're probably just going to have heat on your weapons all of the time, as it is extremely effective at taking most of them down. But you can, of course, swap very freely between them. Your 1 doesn't have a huge cooldown, so you're not going to be restricted by it most of the time, and you can swap pretty freely and, you know, can cast pretty often to keep that buff pretty much always up. But yeah, that's what's going on with LAVOS. Let's jump into Steel Path and show some stuff off. Oh, a thing that I should show here in the Simulacrum, though, is that obviously you can do, like, the big combo of, like, all that stuff in order to use his 4 and kill guys and stuff. But also, alternatively, we could just, like, we could just do this. This is with heat, so this is like a slower showing of this as well, which is worth noting. But like this is with like a non-currently meta weapon, with like the worst buff. I'm gonna show the corrosive shards thing in a second, but yeah, if you're just like shooting enemies, this will like kill anything at like the most levels of play, without you having to like worry about what statuses are on them or like spread things with the CD or do anything like that. And if you're on a corrosive shard using Warframe, you can just make it look like this, which is going to look real funny. Which we are, a corrosive shard using Warframe. So yeah, that's, you know, LAVOS' abilities, some people like them, and that's what this build is for. If you like LAVOS' abilities and you want them to work, that is what this ability, or this build is for. If you just want to, like, you know, use Valence Infusion and just, like, shoot dudes, also totally doable with this build, but you can probably drop Precision Intensify for, like, even more survivability if you want to go that direction, and do a few things of, like, not worrying about casting his 3 or his 4 or maybe even his 1 ever. But yeah, let's jump into Steel Path and just spread the corrosion a bit. All right, jumping back into Tav. Also, I see people continue to say, like I should run Netracells and stuff. And I've thought about it a bit more. Netracells don't actually have me fight that many enemies. They're like an interesting thing, but like most of the enemies in Netracells are actually weaker than the enemies in this mission, is a thing that I've been thinking about. Like they don't have like the full Steel Path modifiers or anything like that. And are just kind of they're not very challenging. In terms of like regular Netracell stuff. I could do a Deep Archimedia, but that also feels like a weird thing because you're never actually doing that content with like a kit of gear. And like all those challenges like affect a bunch of different Warframes like very disproportionately. So that feels like a weird thing to do that I've seen people like suggesting that maybe I should do that. But that feels like a very strange fit as well. Also, we're going to swap between weapons a bit here. I'm just going to like, you know, use the Sea-Doo a bit. Like just kind of show what like this is up to. As you can see, it can kill. Throw the 4 out here. Should kill all those guys. Yep. Yeah, just doing Sea-Doo plus LAVOS 4 is still fine. Like whenever we get, you know, very likely Sea-Doo Prime, it will be better. You know, maybe not good. Yeah, LAVOS is he's a Warframe that I don't... Oh, right, I have to wait for my 3s, my 4 to cool down. He's a Warframe that I don't like a particularly large amount because his cooldowns are, like, long and his kit is clunky and, you know, he's fine. You know, he's totally okay. Against Xmas, you can see how nice it is just to, like, rip their armor off and just Sea-Doo them down. It's very good. But yeah, LAVOS is one of those Warframes that's like, he's got abilities you can cast, you know what I mean? Like that guy right there, you can cast those abilities. And they sure do work if you pamper them like a baby dolphin. But, you know, not really what I want to be doing as most Warframes. In terms of just like kind of having to make it work. A lot of Warframes just work. and that's my large preference. I know the LAVOS does have like a cult following of like people that like what he does. And don't get me wrong, I think he looks really cool, and I think the idea of like all of his abilities pretty sick. I just think that he should be buffed. Like I actually think functionally there's really not much I would change about LAVOS. It's just that if his abilities were like just stronger than they are, he'd be in a pretty perfect position, I think. Like you give his 4 like a little bit of range, and like maybe it puts 10 times the amount of status it outputs now, and we're in business. Like we're talking about some like a pretty good ability at that point, likely. Same for his 3, same for his 1. Like you make it so that like, his 1, pretty much all of his abilities just need to like put more status out than they do right now in order to just suddenly be good. I don't think it's like, you know, a particularly large leap, but like if we were looking at like every hit of his 4, it does 10 stacks of whatever you've put out on it. Like that right there is an instant game changer for like how good LAVOS is, because right now it's just kind of sad. Like you shoot out his 4 and it's like a single stack of heat, and it's like a single stack of heat is, you know, it's not great. Because a single stack of heat is like, you know, LAVOS is supposed to be like a status Warframe, and Gauss is laughing at him putting out a single stack of heat, right? You can see survivability, not a problem at all with this build, though. Yeah, Eclipse actually ended up... I tried a few different subsumes on him. Obviously, like the classic Roar and stuff will increase his damage and stuff like that, but really was not very comfortable to use, especially in like higher level content. Like enemies would just like be able to like kill you pretty simply, honestly. Even with adaptation most of the time, like some of the inconsistencies with that ability would just really... Well, not with that ability, with that mod, would like really show themselves on LAVOS pretty often, which was unfortunate. But yeah, like having both Eclipse and adaptation has actually been super nice. I don't think it's something that I'm going to do like definitely not the vast majority of the time on frames, but it is not bad here for like, you know, giving you the time to do your ability stuff and like, you know, just be tanking it. Just like be doing whatever you need to do to set everything up before casting your 4. And getting enemies to actually die from it. Speaking of getting enemies to actually die from it, though, you can see that I've been like kind of trying to get this like pretty well run here and like be cast most of the time. We're about to hit that 5-minute mark, which I'll cast this first. Oh, and then of course Acolytes. Acolytes really don't care for the Sea-Doo. This one can purge statuses off of it, so, you know, a little more annoying, but not a real problem. In terms of, like, taking damage, not an issue at all. And then our kill rate, 365. So we've been, you know, we're at, like, 345% power strength, and we're, like, spamming out a bunch of statuses to double the damage a bunch of times, and using his 4, and, you know, so on and so forth, but it's pretty underwhelming. If you like LAVOS, I am glad that you like LAVOS. But please, he should be buffed. Like doing what I'm doing now, like the high synergy of like what the Sea-Doo does to spread on these enemies, and like having to pick particular elements and stuff like that, and he should be doing so much more than this. Like, his abilities should, like, be able to kill. Like, his 3 should be able to kill. His 1 should be able to kill. And they just don't. And it's really unfortunate, because he is such a cool Warframe thematically, and the numbers just don't let him do it. We're actually going to swap up here now, because over time I'll start running the risk of running out of air. But yeah, if I just, like, use the new core here on Corrosive, you can immediately see, like, why am I doing the LAVOS stuff, right? Like, very, very immediately, like, the new core is, like, old meta at this point. It's still very good, obviously. But, like, this is insanely better than actually using his abilities and doing, like, the synergy with the Sea-Doo. Or even, like, spreading statuses with the Epitaph, which I know some people are going to bring up. Like, just shooting gun with his buff of, like, a halfway decent quality is so much better than using his abilities. Which sucks. I don't want that to be the case, to be clear. Like, I do not want that for LAVOS. But it's just very, very much where we are currently. Like, this is just objectively so much better. It's more boring, maybe. But again, this isn't what I would like for LAVOS. I would love for his abilities to be, like, killing enemies. That would be great. But it is, you know, just not really the case at higher levels. At lower levels, do whatever you want. I mean, really, everything works at lower levels, even the bad Warframes. Which, like, yeah. It's tough. It's tough out there to be LAVOS. It's a tough world whenever you have an augment that I think is fairly objectively... The passive ability of this augment is better than every single thing that LAVOS does combined. Like, his 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's actively better than everything else he's had prior to this. And it's a very good augment. Like, this augment on a lot of other Warframes could, like, propel them to, like, a full, like, letter grade upgrade. But for LAVOS, it's now, like, kind of the only thing he does. Besides pilot a railjack pretty well, because he has no energy costs. So piloting a railjack, he's pretty solid for that. He's got that on the list there. But yeah, it's not fantastic. I wish it was better. I feel for the LAVOS players. I want your Warframe to be better, because I really actually think he looks super cool and plays really fun. But he's just, you know, having a little bit of a tough time here. He gets this stacked up for melee influence. Give me a stack here. He ran away again. That should kill him. Far less damage than I thought it would do. Yeah, he's dead now. Just throwing out the cost assist a little bit. Which also cost assist. Hey, shocker, it's quite good. It strips all the armor off the enemies, and then they die to all the electric procs that every enemy is taking. Pretty solid. But yeah, LAVOS. What a really cool design that honestly should really be buffed. Should really be buffed with the things that he's capable of doing. You can see, like, Sea-Doo damage still pretty good. Even on enemies who are not very, like, status vulnerable. Still, like, usable numbers here. But yeah, you know, that's 779 kills. Much less than what we'd want. Obviously, you can get him up to, like, kill rate numbers that you're looking for with good guns. But, in terms of what his abilities are bringing to the table, they're not bringing much. They're bringing Valence Infusion, which is sad. It's very sad that the augment is what all of his abilities are currently bringing, where it just allows you to pick an element to proc a lot, and that outperforms everything LAVOS has done previously. You hate to see that for what is theoretically a DPS Warframe. Theoretically, I would say, like, he probably should be like a Dagath setup where he's, like, kind of a health tank, kind of a DPS. And, you know, if he was even as good as Dagath, I would think I would be... I'm into that personally, for me. But yeah, this is a thing you can do with LAVOS. For those of you who also like him, but he's not great right now. But yeah, that's what's up with LAVOS. I will see you guys tomorrow. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. And also, of course, thanks as usual to the patrons for supporting the channel, especially the $10 patrons: Alex Parnham, Andrew, Arbiter Daydream, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Canolathra, Dylan Dworsky, Ethrain, Havon, James Harstthorne, JC4Science, John Lobdell, Joshua Adams, Luzanth, Malachx Williams, Mikokel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Moxidate, Ruby, Sanyu, Skur, Sharp247, Camarilla Wastelander, The Coupon of Death, Tomeworm, Victor Palmer, Waifu Wars, Waldad, and Seraphir. And of course, thank you to all of the $5 patrons as well. Your support is extremely, extremely appreciated. But yeah, we're about to get the Dante update. Should be an excellent time. Expect tons of videos to be coming about all the changes and new stuff that we're getting in that update, and should be excellent. And then the tier list will hopefully shortly follow.